Hi guys, it's Miss Alyssa. I'm going to read Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If I can get to the right page. One winter's day, a baby girl was born to a king and queen. She was very pretty, with skin as white as snow and lips as red as blood. She was named Snow White before her mother sadly died. The king remarried, but his new queen was vain and unkind. She had a magic mirror, which she would say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? You, O queen, are the fairest of them all." Many years later, when Snow White was 16, the queen asked the same question, and the mirror replied, "You, O queen, are very fair, but Snow White is now the fairest of them all." The queen was absolutely furious. She ordered the huntsman to find her stepdaughter and do away with her. The huntsman took Snow White into the forest, but he could not bring himself to do the wicked deed. Instead, he told Snow White to flee, and he went back to the queen, pretending he had carried out her wishes. "Run away, Snow White, and never come back." Snow White ran and ran until the evening began to fall, when she stumbled across a little cottage. "I wonder if anyone is home," Snow White said. She walked up the path and tried the door, and to Snow White's surprise, it was open. She went inside the cottage to see if anyone was there. Everything inside was very small and neat. Against the wall stood 7 little beds. Snow White sank down into one and soon fell fast asleep. Later that night, the owners of the cottage came back. They were 7 dwarfs who had been mining in the mountains for jewels. When Snow White awoke, she explained to the dwarfs what happened. They kindly said, "You're very welcome to stay here with us." While the dwarfs went out to work, Snow White looked after the cottage. Each day they warned her to beware of her stepmother. But one day, months later, the magic mirror told the evil queen that Snow White was still alive. "So Snow White is in the forest?" The queen set out to look for Snow White, disguised as an old woman. She took with her an apple that was poisoned on one side. Eventually, the queen found the dwarf's cottage and called out to Snow White, "Apples for sale, delicious, juicy, sweet apples." "No, thank you," said Snow White, but the queen wouldn't take no for an answer. She cut off a piece from the green half. "Look, I will eat some first. It's quite safe." Snow White was hungry, so she took the apple, taking a bite from the rosy red side. Straight away she fell down as if dead. When the dwarfs came home and found Snow White, they hugged each other and wept. They made a glass bed for Snow White. Very strangely, she always looked like she had just fallen asleep. One day, a prince rode by. He stopped to look at Snow White, but as he leant closer and he knocked on the glass, the poisoned apple fell from her mouth and she awoke. The prince took Snow White to his palace to recover, and soon they fell in love. The dwarfs were the guest of honor at the wedding. Congratulations! Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. The end. Thanks, friends!